Hi, everyone. Welcome to Inquirer Live at Gameday Central alongside EJ Smith. I am Olivia Reiner. We are coming at you live from Lincoln Financial Field, getting set for the Eagles matinee matchup against the Carolina Panthers. EJ, how you doing?
I mean, you just said it, Olivia. It's a 1 o'clock kickoff, and the sun is out. It's it's a little cold, but that's. I think some people would say that's football weather. So no, I'm doing really well. I'm excited for the game. Excited for the show.
It's a little bit warmer than it has been all week, so looking forward to some beautiful football weather going on out here. It's a beautiful day for some great games. So everyone, as a reminder, as always, you can be a part of our conversation. You can head on over to inquirer.com/Eagles game day. Leave us a question, a comment, whatever is on your mind. We would love to hear from you, and we will answer some of those questions that you have toward the end of our show today. EJ, we have a lot to discuss as it relates to the health of the Eagles right now. Some good news, some not so good news. 2 starters in, 2 starters out. First, wide receiver Devontae Smith is back in action after missing the last 2 games due to a hamstring injury. It has been nagging for about a month at this point. Now he says he is fresh and ready to go. So the Eagles will look to see him back out there on the field. Additionally, cornerback Darius Slay is back after a 1-game layoff after he missed last week against the Ravens with a concussion. So again, a big addition there for the Eagles secondary. However, a couple of not so good updates for the Eagles. The fact that tight end Dallas Goedert is out and he is on injured reserve now with a knee injury that he sustained last week. So again, Jalen Hurts has been dealing with some atrophy to his receiving core throughout the season. They have seldom been together. So now he looks to be down yet another one of his top receivers for at least the next 4 games. The Inquirer's Jeff McClain reported earlier this week that Goddard is not a season-ending injury and that there is a chance that he is able to come back and help this team in the playoffs when that time comes. Additionally, safety Reed Blankenship, he is also out with a concussion, so we will look to see Tristan McCollum step up and start in his place, his first career start. EJ, I want to talk to you about this receiving core, the fact that it has been so banged up throughout the course of the season. Eagles haven't had to rely a lot on their receivers lately. Saquon Barkley is the one who is stealing the show, especially since the bye week, as the Eagles have pivoted to a more run-focused offense. In the absence of Dallas Goedert, with Devontae Smith now coming back for the foreseeable future, how do you expect the Eagles passing game to function, even though it hasn't been a focal point of their game?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've at least seen what it looks like without Dallas Goedert when the other 2 guys are there. Obviously, earlier this season, Dallas Goedert missed some time. Listen, like you said it, like they really haven't had all of their guys available for many games this season, but it's kind of like the luxury of having so many talented players in your arsenal of skill players, like you mentioned, Saquon Barkley, AJ Brown, Devontae Smith being like the main components to this offense for Jalen Hurts to kind of play off of. I really feel like most teams in the NFL at this point are missing somebody, and one of their main pass targets is usually kind of out of the lineup at this point in the year. So the fact that they have so much talent kind of can cover it up. I think Devontae Smith's return is a really big boon, not only for the Eagles offense, but specifically AJ Brown. I've talked on the show before about how when Devontae's not in the lineup, coverages can sort of tilt more aggressively toward AJ Brown. Defenses can pretty much just use more resources, to kind of take away AJ Brown out of the game. Obviously, he's been impactful still. He's still had good production without Devontae Smith in the lineup, but I think that he has the potential to have some dominant games because Devontae Smith is back to kind of even things out, balance out the Eagles formations.
Eagles get one of their receivers back. They're down 1 on the other side of the ball. Again, Reed Blankenship is out. So, like I said, McCollum looking to make his first career NFL start. He has appeared in games over the last 2 years, about 12 games over the last 2 years for the Eagles. But now it is his time to shine. He had a really strong game when he came in relief of Blankenship last week. He nearly picked off Lamar Jackson late in the game, almost made a play on 4th down. Ball sailed through his hands. He told me earlier this week that he has been on the jugs machine a little bit more than he typically would in other weeks. So perhaps we will see him be able to snag one in today's game. The reason he is starting is because Sidney Brown is also out with a knee injury, which is a bit of a concern. We don't know exactly if that knee is related to his ACL tear that he suffered late last season, this regular season finale last year. And he came back about week 7, I believe, this year. So we don't know if those things are related at all, but perhaps we will find out next week. So with in addition to that, to both Brown and Blankenship being out for today's game, Britton Covey is dealing with a neck injury and he will not play. And that looks like Cooper DeJean will potentially slide back into his first string punt returner role that he held down with, while Covey was out for about 7 weeks dealing with a broken shoulder blade earlier in the season. DeJean was having a really good he was really talented. He really showed that that was a skill set that he had developed while he was at Iowa, and he took it to the NFL level and really made it his own as a really talented punt returner. How might Vic Fangio feel about DeJean stepping back into that role, given the substantial role that he now has on defense?
Yeah, I mean, Vic Fangio didn't really make any bones about it earlier this season about how he doesn't like seeing his, a major component of his defense contributing in such a. I mean, I think most positions are dangerous, but punt returner is definitely a high risk type of position. You can definitely take some big hits. The way that Cooper DeJean returns punts as well, it definitely invites contact. He really does. He returns punts like a defensive player. You would expect them to. He sort of is like willing to try and run through guys, but honestly, it kind of fits the identity of this Eagles team. So I think it kind of fits well. Like you mentioned, when Britton Covey was out, I think there were some questions about, whether or not Cooper DeJean was kind of playing well enough in that punt return role to hold on to it even after Covey returned. I think the fact that, Covey's kind of a return specialist, and I think Covey is a little bit more shorthanded back there, to be fair. But, I think the fact that Covey's role is a little bit more limited kind of lends himself to being that return specialist. But yeah, I think that Cooper DeJean has shown enough where you don't really have to worry about the Eagles punt return unit. Now, maybe I just jinxed him. Maybe he'll drop a punt today in a high leverage moment. But, I do think that he has shown enough to be encouraged about his performance back there.
Mm-hmm. In addition to all of these moves, we're also seeing practice squad elevation. Safety Andre Sam, he will be up for today's game, and a fullback. The Eagles have a bona fide fullback on their roster. I think for the first time since 2016, they had one on their practice squad at the time. Kari Blasingame is up for today's game, and he figures to slide into the role that Ben Van Sumeren once held, the inside linebacker turned fullback who sustained a season-ending knee injury in practice last week. He's really only been getting, before he went down, Van Sumeren only had about maybe 5 offensive snaps per game or so. However, when he was on the field, he was making an impact as a lead blocker for Saquon Barkley on some of his runs. What do you expect to see out of Blasingame in his first game as an Eagle?
Yeah, I think that the fact that they signed him kind of speaks to the fact that this fullback package is here to stay. It might even grow. I talked to Kari Blasingame earlier this week, and he said that he was encouraged seeing that the Eagles were using a fullback kind of progressively more and more as the season wore on, and he's hoping that he can continue, giving them a reason to have a fullback on the field, as they lean into this run-heavy approach with, kind of like they needed a variety to it. I think the under center runs have been a good change-up, and honestly, they've been doing a good job building play-action passing game off of those run plays under center as well. We've seen Jalen Hurts kind of being able to unlock the middle of the field with some of those plays, and that's really important. That's something that Jalen Hurts has struggled with at points in his career, being able to kind of take advantage of the middle of the field. Being able to use play action and under center formations like that really does make it a lot easier for a quarterback. So, yeah, I think it's honestly an important part of this offense, and especially going into these games. Like we mentioned, it's getting a little colder. The stakes are starting to raise a little bit. Playoff implications are starting to become more clear. In those games, you really do need to be able to run the ball, be able to take it to teams, and this guy should be able to help.
All right. And so those are all of the injuries that the Eagles are dealing with. As far as the Panthers, they will be lacking Jadeveon Clowney, their edge rusher, due to a knee injury today. So that's the big update there on the other side of the stadium there. All right, let's transition into our latest headlines segment. The Eagles are going up against the Panthers, whose record on the surface does not look so great this season. They are 3-9. However, they have been heating up as of late. Their last 2 games they lost due to walk-off field goals. And I think the big reason that the Panthers have been able to take this step lately is because of the improvement of Bryce Young. The quarterback has been playing much better over his last 4 games, especially in the last 2 games. 2 of his 3 career games with over 250 passing yards have come in these last 2 weeks as they face the Chiefs and the Buccaneers. I'm sure he'll be looking to put up similar numbers today. But that said, EJ, we hesitate to use the word trap games, but the Eagles last year, you looked at the Arizona Cardinals as, not a very formidable opponent. The Eagles ultimately lost to them late in the season. Could the Panthers try to have a Cardinals-esque performance here at home for the Eagles as they look to continue on this pseudo hot streak?
I mean, it could certainly happen. That's what you hear from players all week. It's honestly, it's a cliche, but it's cliche because it's true that in the NFL you really can't take any team lightly. When you look back at that Cardinals game from last year, I do think like some of it is probably harder to do against the Eagles this year. Like the Cardinals really wanted to run the ball, kind of dominate time of possession, keep the Eagles offense off the field for long stretches of play, and kind of change the complexion of the game. And they did that really well in the second half. It's also important to remember like the Eagles had a pretty sizable lead in that game, and the Cardinals kind of had to mount this comeback in the second half. And I do think that the Eagles defense has shown enough where I don't feel like they're going to have 5 consecutive drives giving up touchdowns and not being able to get off the field because they're just getting dominated in the run game. So I do think that this team is better suited to handle that type of that type of game state, game script, whatever you want to call it. But yeah, I do. I think that the point remains very very valid. AJ Brown talked about that earlier this week. He mentioned the Cardinals game, specifically mentioned the Cardinals game as an example where like if you take a team too lightly late in the season, you could be humbled very quickly. I mean, like you mentioned, the Panthers have been able to kind of hang around games. They've kind of been able to keep it close. But listen, I mean, I do think that the Eagles have a significant talent advantage if they play to the way that they've played in this during this 8-game winning streak, really just throughout the season as a whole. Even when they struggled earlier in the season, I feel like they should be able to win this game pretty comfortably.
Mm-hmm. The big difference between the 2023 Eagles and the 2024 Eagles, aside from the much improved defense, is the fact that Saquon Barkley is a member of this incredibly talented rushing offense that the Eagles have been able to create in tandem with Barkley and this offensive line. And today could potentially be a big day for Barkley. He is 109 rushing yards away from breaking LaShawn McCoy's single-season franchise rushing yards record that he set back in 2013. Could be a really dominant day for the run game. This stat truly blew my mind from Next Gen Stats. So the Eagles are going to be just the 7th top-ranked rushing offense to play at home against the last-ranked rushing defense in Week 14 or later since 1970. Can you guess, EJ, what the previous 6 teams, how well they did? The teams with the top-ranked rushing offense, I'm not even going to make you guess. Those teams went 6-0. So they averaged 226.3 rushing yards per game, which is like an absolutely crazy, mind-blowing number. With that all in mind, do you feel like Barkley is going to break that franchise record today?
Yeah, I mean, could he break it in the first half? Even I do think that he's got a really good chance to do it. This Panthers defense, like you mentioned, has struggled against the run. They haven't really there's only one example that they've held a team to under 100 rushing yards this season. So, given how well the Eagles run, even against top-ranked run defenses, even against, a team like the Baltimore Ravens that is known for being able to stop the run and, uses a lot of resources to stop the run, even those teams struggle against this Eagles running game because of how dominant it can be. So I do think that Saquon Barkley probably gets that franchise record. I think, that he's probably has his sights on even bigger records, which we'll talk about later. So yeah, I definitely think that he's got a chance to break it.
Now on the other side of the ball there, the Panthers have had a lot of success rushing the ball with Chuba Hubbard at the helm. Miles Sanders is currently on injured reserve, but Hubbard has been really talented for them this year. He ranks 3rd in the league in rushing yards over expected, behind Barkley and Derrick Henry. The Eagles, on the other hand, are coming off of a really dominant game on the ground, going up against the Ravens rushing offense, one of the best units in the league behind Derrick Henry. The Ravens have only failed to score rushing touchdowns in 2 of their games this season, and the Eagles were one of those games. How do you feel like, knowing the fact that the Panthers could potentially, they have a strong rushing attack, how do you feel like Fangio could potentially try to limit the run while also keeping in mind the fact that Young has heated up in recent weeks?
Yeah, I kind of think back to that Ravens game and even earlier in the season when the Eagles really did much better against the run and odd fronts. And against the Ravens, we saw them use a lot of odd fronts with Jordan Davis kind of being able to stay as that nose tackle, which is where I definitely think he's more comfortable, playing as a nose tackle rather than a three technique in an even front. It's where he played in college. And honestly, like at this point in his career, even he kind of alluded to that. And Vic Fangio said the same. Like he is more of a run stopping player than a pass rusher at this point. We can have a conversation about whether or not that's a good value for a first round pick. But I do think that the grand scheme of things, like having Jordan Davis at the center of that defensive line is going to be important for stopping the run in this game. So yeah, I do think this is a type of game where like you mentioned like the Bryce Huff effect, like, or sorry, the Bryce Young effect. A lot of Bryces that we deal with these days. But yeah, with the Bryce Young effect, like I do think this is probably a game where you can be a little bit more comfortable coming out in a base defense, even against if 11 personnel. If the Panthers have a lot of receivers on the field, you might still feel confident that you can kind of come out in a base defense or even a 5-1 to get Cooper DeJean on the field. Like I think that there are ways that you can keep an odd front on the field to be able to combat those runs while also being able to handle this Panthers passing attack because it's not the most vaunted passing attack in the NFL.
Mm-hmm. All right, let us transition into our favorite segment of the show, the Fan Zone. Thank you all for leaving some of your comments, your questions over on inquirer.com/Eagles Game Day. If you haven't left a question or a comment over there yet, we will be over there during the game talking to you all throughout the game. So we look forward to conversing with you in just a little bit. But let's take this question/comment here first from Jay Galt. They said, against the worst run defense, just follow the formula, unleash the big guys up front, and feed Saquon Barkley. Those big guys being the Eagles offensive line, who have paved the way for Barkley to get to this point, to even be on the cusp of breaking this single season franchise rushing yards record. EJ, what has impressed you or surprised you most so far this season about this marriage between these two really talented units that I'm not even sure if we foresaw what is happening now happening at the start of the season?
Yeah, I would say the explosive plays that they've been able to generate have surprised me. I knew that this was going to be a good run game. It's been a good run game with running backs worse than Saquon Barkley. And, I think the offensive line kind of acknowledges that, that Saquon's vision, his ability to kind of, not only press for the, 6-yard gains, 7-yard gains, but press for those 20, 30, 40, 70, whatever it may be, those big gains, those, like I said, those explosive plays. The reason that the run game kind of gets a bad rap in like analytics communities and why, like, I think some forward thinking, progressive thinking people when, football minds would tell you that like the running the ball isn't necessarily a winning formula in the modern game is because it doesn't have as many explosive plays. I think Saquon kind of makes that a moot point. And, again, like I mentioned, the Eagles offensive line definitely, it takes appreciation for the fact that Saquon is so always pushing for those big gains. I think it's probably a good thing to mention to our viewers that the Eagles offensive lineman hung up pictures of Saquon Barkley in the locker room this week, right by the offensive line's locker stalls, a starting offensive lineman. There are two pictures, one and the other's like writing underneath them. So one of them says "Our Savior" and the other one says "The Chosen One." I asked Jordan Mailata about them, and he said that Landon Dickerson left a lifting session early to put them up. So yeah, I definitely think that there's a mutual appreciation from those from obviously Saquon and the Eagles starting offensive line, and honestly for good reason.
I think the love and the respect is mutual as much as the Eagles offensive line praise Barkley and they speak highly of him and they call him their savior, if you will. Barkley has been just as complimentary of them, and every time he receives praise or he breaks some sort of record or passes someone on a leaderboard, he deflects the praise right to them. So it's been a really fun aspect of this Eagles team this year to observe and to witness, and we'll see if they're able to do it. And they say if the Eagles start out slow again and play a sloppy game, they could even lose. That said, they still expect the Eagles to win this game, but not without some nail-biting moments. A lot of those nail-biting moments have come early on in games. As Steve's 11 mentions, Eagles continue to be plagued by slow starts. It is an issue that they have had all season long. They rank last in the league in first quarter points per game. EJ, will anything change today? And even if it doesn't, is there something that they're still learning from these opening drives, even when they're not scoring?
Yeah, I think we're at the point in the season where like the fact that they haven't been able to figure this out is indicative that it's not just one thing. It's not like an easy fix. It's definitely a concern. You know, that like the Eagles. I listen. Like they're obviously in a great spot in the seeding. They're like doing well record wise, but I think in terms of like big questions going into this final stretch of the regular season and the postseason, where the games are going to get harder and the games are going to get tighter. Like I think the fact that they have had these slow starts, it's one of the only major questions that still kind of lingers about what this team's ceiling really is. I think that they do have quite a high ceiling, but in those games, I think that really can come back to bite you. They've been awesome in every other quarter. They've been very productive, but I've talked before on the show about like game script. Being able to get a lead early and kind of play to that lead. And the Eagles are built that way. They have Saquon Barkley to kind of run, kind of bleed the clock, and they can really have these long time of possessions because of their run game, and obviously their pass rush really benefits from being able to make opposing offenses one-dimensional. So the fact that they've been able to overcome that this season kind of speaks to how talented they are and how much this team can accomplish. But I do think, again, against some of the better teams in the league, they spotted the Ravens 9 points and they still won. So I think that speaks to, again, how they can still win these games. But I think, again, like later in the year, I think that could come up.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much, Steves, for your question. Let's take this one here from Banquet Pro. They say, if this is a blowout, they're curious to see how the Eagles handle Saquon Barkley's load management versus chasing this record. In other words, less reps going forward to gear up for the playoffs. Listen, this isn't the first time. This wouldn't be the first time that Nick Sirianni would have asked Saquon Barkley if he wanted to call a day a little bit early at the expense of reaching a milestone. In the Giants game, if you remember, we all got to see that mic'd up moment between Sirianni and Barkley as Sirianni asked him if he wanted to stay in the game or if he wanted to come out as he was approaching his single season career high in rushing yards, as the Eagles were up by quite a bit at that point in the game. Barkley said, "Let the boys eat," I believe, to something to that effect, where he wanted to see Kenny Gainwell and Will Shipley get some playing time and get out there. So could we be in a similar situation today? That is the big question. EJ, I'm curious, if you feel like, let's say the Eagles end up coming out to a big lead somehow without Saquon Barkley, do you think that they would pull him early? Do you even think that this is a scenario that the Eagles will be in, given the potential success that Barkley could have against one of the worst rushing defense in the league?
Yeah, I think that their singular focus is probably on getting him to the postseason because this offense revolves around him at this point. He is the most important player on that offense, I would say. I mean, listen, Jalen Hurts probably has a pretty good case. A.J. Brown has a pretty good case. But in terms of production, it's hard to argue against what Saquon Barkley's done for this group. And yeah, I think that you kind of hit it right on the head there with like, I don't think Saquon would want to stay in the game to chase the record. Like, I think that he also would probably trade, a postseason run, at least being available for a postseason run for any of these single season records. And I think that is commendable from him. But I also think like you can't be chasing the record. You have 18 games to get the 17 game record. You can't be kind of like being a little bit dishonest about trying to get it. Trying to stack up your numbers. So I feel like if he's going to get it, he's going to get it naturally. He's not going to do it by like overtly trying to get it.
Mm-hmm. And he's got plenty of time to get there. All right, let's transition into our player picks. EJ, we've discussed many of the players that are going to have an impact in today's game. However, if you could only pick one, who are you most eager to see play?
Yeah, I think Quinyon Mitchell is kind of a sneaky player that I want to keep an eye on today. He still doesn't have that first career interception, and I feel like, he's had such a great year that it's got to be coming for him. He had a lot of opportunities early in the season, kind of resulted in teams not really trying him very much anymore, which is really hard for a rookie quarterback to do. I know I probably said that on the show before, but it really does. It kind of blows my mind every week that opposing offenses are like, we're not even going to try Quinyon at this point. Like, we know that he's going to be in good coverage. He's going to be, somebody that's not worth testing. So, the Panthers quarterbacks this year have thrown 12 interceptions, which is tied for fourth most in the NFL. Bryce Young, though, has not thrown an interception in any of the last 3 Panthers games. So I do think that, that's going in the right direction, but I think that this Eagles secondary is going to have opportunities to create turnovers. And I think Quinyon Mitchell might just get that first career interception today.
All right, EJ, good pick. I'm going with the low-hanging fruit, Saquon Barkley. I mean, he is the story for this Eagles team going into today's game. Not only is he going to not only does he have the potential this season to break the franchise single-season rushing yards record, but he also has the potential to break the NFL single-season rushing yards record, which it was set by Eric Dickerson back in 1984 at 2,105 yards. So listen, he could make up some serious ground today, given just the history that top ranked rushing offenses have had against last ranked rushing defenses historically at this point in the season. I expect him early on to make a big push. And especially because it's interesting, we've been talking about whether or not we think he's going to get pulled later in the game if the Eagles have a big lead. He has been incredibly successful for them on the ground later in games. We've seen the Eagles call a couple particular run plays that they like later in games when they get particular looks that they like. I wonder if we'll start to see maybe some more of those attempts at some home runs potentially in or early on in today's game in an effort to get him a little bit closer and then potentially to pull him out. But as you mentioned, listen, there's a lot of season left and there's plenty of time for him to set break either of these records. Certainly the franchise record, the NFL record is a little bit more lofty, but we'll see how things go. All right, let us transition into our predictions. Me and our special guest here, Jeff McLean, we've had a little bit of a rough season, the two of us. I will say, not to throw you under the bus. Maybe I'll speak for just myself, Jeff. My my record has not been great this year. I will own up to that, but I'm curious in a game like today's where 3-9, this is not the best Panthers team, but there are some interesting matchups. Jeff, which one are you most intrigued by going into today's game?
Well, I think for the Panthers to have any chance of winning, they're going to have to run the ball. And, that's the one area I think they can hang their hats on. And look, I know the Eagles' run defense has been very good over the last 2 months, but this is, a really good offensive line, actually. The Panthers have some really good run blockers up front. Robert Hunt, the right guard is strong. Damian Lewis, the left guard, is strong. Cade Mays at center, maybe a better pass protector than he is a run blocker, but he can get the job done on combos. And then, of course, they have Chuba Hubbard, who's a really good running back. And, this offense, Dave Canales, he will – he wants some balance. He wants to get his quarterback Bryce Young into situations where it's not third and long. So he will kind of pound the ground with the football and with Hubbard. And the Eagles' run defense, at times it has, even during this 2-month span, it's been a little leaky. So I think there's an opportunity for the Panthers here to kind of exploit them, especially if they can get them light in the box, which we, EJ talked about this earlier. We've seen more of. Typically that's to match personnel, but I think Vic Fangio feels comfortable with the 4-man front. Jordan Davis, as EJ had mentioned, and as Olivia had wrote about earlier this week when you spoke to him, has been very good defending the run, and he's been able to do that even in the 4-man front. It's not just him, obviously. You need everybody to contribute against stopping the run. But all that being said, I think that the Panthers, if they have any chance of maybe bleeding this game out and maybe getting it to the fourth quarter where they're within one or two, within one score or not, it's going to have to be done on the ground.
Mm-hmm. Panthers have struggled this season overall, having a better season lately, losing their last 2 games on walk-off field goals. Jeff, with all of that in mind, considering how they've been playing lately, what is your final score prediction for today's game?
Well, I mean, you guys talked about this enough, with the Barkley and the run offense versus the worst run defense in the NFL. It's just, there's plenty of reason to throw the ball with AJ Brown, Devontae Smith now back after missing 2 games because their pass defense isn't that good. But I think this is stick to the formula at least early on. Get Barkley going. And I think that's what you'll see out of this team, and which should be enough to give them the victory and maybe even coast. As I said, there's an opportunity for the Panthers here. They have been playing well over the last month of going 2-2 in the last 2 games. They kind of took that down to the wire each game, but I still feel like the Eagles are just going to overpower this team. Just too much there's too much depth. There's too much talent on this team versus the Panthers that are really kind of lacking it. So I see a comfortable win, 40-20. I think I said in the predictions that we did in the paper and online, and I'll stick with that for right now.
All right, a sizable margin for the Eagles in Jeff's prediction. EJ, what do you have this final score looking like?
Yeah, I see it a lot the same way that Jeff sees it. I think that Bryce Young looks better. I think that offense looks better in general. I think that they've been playing better in the last 4 weeks, but all of that can be true, and the Eagles are still, they have such an advantage at so many different spots. They are, on paper at the very least, they should be able to win this game comfortably. So, yeah, I have the Eagles winning 31-13 and maybe a little bit of a tighter margin, at least maybe a little bit of a lower scoring game for the Eagles. But I think they should be able to win this game and kind of move on to this final stretch of the season, and try and continue to pursue the NFC seeding race, I would say.
Mm-hmm. I am very close to you with our final score predictions, EJ. I have the Eagles winning 31-14. So the Panthers make that extra point, or however we have things shaken out. You might have a touchdown and 2 field goals. I don't know how it's going to all fall, but yeah, I agree. I think this is going to be an opportunity for the Eagles to really prove that they are not the team that they were last year. I know, just based on the 2 seasons we've seen over the last 2 years, the Eagles to this point at 10-2 look a lot different than the Eagles did last year, especially looking back at 10-1 when things just collapsed after that. This is a much different team. This is a much, much better defense. This is, obviously, as we've already discussed, Barkley is on this team, and he has been an absolute boon to the offense as a whole. This is an opportunity for them to show that they've learned from the adversity from last year. And as they get into the playoff push here at this point, they must prove that they've learned from last year and they've learned from the mistakes. And they're not going to fall to lesser or underestimate lesser opponents like they did the Arizona Cardinals last year, this time around against the Carolina Panthers. So still, even if there is a little bit less juice around this game, it's an important one for them to win nonetheless. All right, everyone, that is going to do it for us today. Thank you so much for joining us, Inquirer Live at Gameday Central. As a reminder, if you're not already over there, head on over to inquirer.com/Eagles Game Day. We will be chatting with you throughout the game, so we look forward to speaking with you and just commenting in real time.
Yeah, and please keep up with more Eagles coverage on my podcast, Uncovering the Birds, with episodes dropping every week. We'll have another one this Tuesday. Listen to wherever you get your podcast, or go to inquirer.com/podcast.
Once again, that is all for today. Thanks so much for tuning into Gameday Central. We'll see you next time.